Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Earth 2 podcast, your weekly exploration of the DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters through the Silver and the Bronze Ages of comics. I'm Peter Watson.
And I'm David Steele. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We return to the pages of The Flash this week.
Yay!
A quick return, if you pardon the expression. We're doing the lead story from issue 228, which was published on the 23rd of April 1974, 22 days after the birth of Stewart from Menswear.
There we are.
To give you some context on the Menswear front, so I think at this point, how many members of Menswear are alive? Hang on. 3 members of Menswear are now alive. So at this point, 2 members of Menswear are yet to be born, but this is not our Menswear podcast. No, you can find that elsewhere. Peter is going to tell you about the cover of issue 228 of The Flash.
Well, we've got the Flash logo at the top, the DC Superstars button, the still only 20 cents button, the Comics Code Authority, and also the caption at the top saying, solo starring in this issue, Green Lantern. But none of that's relevant. What you have to do, folks, is take a very, very, very big drink, because it's the biggest full moon I've ever seen in a
Do you know
comic.
What? I didn't even. How long have I owned this comic? A very, very long time indeed. And I didn't even, oh my goodness. Right, anyway.
Yes, it's a giant full moon. And running past the giant full moon in the air is the trickster, because that's what he does with his jet-powered shoes. And he has a big bag of cash, which apparently is burst, because there's tons and tons of dollar notes flying out from it. The Flash is in pursuit. But, oh, what's this? An arm has come in from the side, and it has grabbed the Flash's costume. The Flash looks back aghast. And the person holding back the Flash says, "Now do you believe you can't make a move without me, Flash?" And a caption at the bottom says, "Who is the mystery man that controls every move of the Flash's life?"
Is it Who? Is it Mr. Who? That'd be funny.
That would be, yeah.
This is a great cover, and I look at it closely for the first time, despite owning it for many, many years, and I see that Barry's basically sort of running on the spot, hurling up clouds of dust, and that's hilarious, and that it is a big full moon. How could I not have registered that before? That's hilarious.
Giant full moon.
Take the biggest drink you've ever had in your life, as Peter says. Good grief. Right, we'd better jump straight in then. There's going to be a lot of talking in this one, listeners. Our opening splash image. A domestic scene at the Allen household. Iris is standing, looking a bit surprised. Barry's getting into costume at speed because there's a figure with his back to us with long brown hair and a beard. We can see he's wearing a kind of pale orange t-shirt. He's wearing brown trousers and he seems to be raising a hand and gesturing towards the Allens. Iris is in the process of saying, "Who is he, Barry? How did he ever find out you are the Flash? How does he know all our innermost secrets?" And as Barry's getting transformed into the Flash, he's saying, "I have the same questions, Iris, and I intend to get the answers." And a caption helpfully reads,
"Suppose someone walked into your life and began telling you the things you had never revealed to anyone. Suppose he told you where you're going to be and what you would be doing before you did it. That's a predicament the Scarlet Speedster finds himself in when he comes across such a person, who will soon boast about the day I saved the life of the Flash."
And some more captions tell us that this tale has been brought to us by
Story Cary Bates, editing Julius Schwartz, art Irv Novick, and text Blaisdell.
Interesting. Pete's a big fan of Irv Novick. He may have told you that in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Story properly begins at the top of page 2, over shots of some cars speeding along the highway, and the rated caption reads,
"What can you say about a 25-year-old writer who tried to convince himself the events described in this story never happened? Tried to dismiss it as a nerve-shattering daydream, a wild hallucination brought on by overwork. Tried every way possible to rationalize the experience until he had to accept the truth, incredible and terrifying as it was."
There's a detail in panel 2 when we see, I don't know, is it just a black saloon car passing a sign that reads, "Leaving Ohio." The narration continues.
"But you can judge for yourselves, reader. The writer in question is me. And while I drive back to New York City, I'm going to imagine you're in the seat next to me as I tell you what happened. Just a week ago, I'd started my vacation driving west along Interstate 70 on my way to Athens, Ohio, and Ohio University."
And we get a reasonably good look at our narrator here. We get a better look at him in the next couple of panels. He's a young man, centre-parted, long dark hair, dark beard, glasses, a very 70s look to him indeed. He's driving his blue car along, and in panel 3, he's thinking to himself,
"Don't even have time to stop off for a burger and Coke. Not if I'm gonna hit OU in time for tonight's class reunion."
He narrates panel 4.
I was making good time, all right. A bit too good for my own good, I soon found out.
Yeah, we see that our narrator has been pulled over by a young dark-haired policeman who's scribbling away in his notepad saying, "Your license, please."
Sure. Here, officer. What's the charge?
And we can see that the cop is looking at our driver's license, and we can just about make out the name that says Cary Bates. Interesting. The cop is saying, "You were going 13 miles above the speed limit, Mr. Bates."
Sorry about that, officer.
Wait a minute. Bates, Cary Bates of Queens, New York? Could you by any chance be the Cary Bates who writes The Flash?
Guilty, officer. Don't tell me you still keep up with comic books.
Not me. My son. Flash is Steve's favourite superhero. He showed me lots of issues with your byline in them.
A moment later, we had a mutual exchange of signatures.
Yes, we see that Cary Bates has signed a piece of paper that reads, "To Flash fan Steve Garson from Cary Bates." The cop is saying, "Steve will sure get a bang out of your autograph, Mr. Bates. Sorry I had to hit you with a ticket, but..."
You're only doing your duty, officer.
And the narration continues.
That delayed behind me, I continued westward. And, as I would often do on long drives to help pass the time, I started dreaming up a plot for my next Flash yarn. Then, just a mile outside Athens...
Yes, as the car speeds along the motorway, very helpfully, Cary thinks what's going on.
Strange. Never saw a fog come up so sudden or so thick.
Yep, very, very thick, dense cloud is enveloping the motor. Drives into it in the next panel, thinking,
Whew, better take it real slow and easy till I get through this mess. But no sooner had I begun crawling in first gear...
Things start to brighten up. Car speeds along and Cary thinks,
the fog lifted as suddenly as it dropped. Well, at least I didn't get lost. There's Athens dead ahead.
He draws closer.
But as the city skyline became more visible through the rising mists...
Yep, from inside the car, it's Cary's point of view, and he's thinking,
something screwy here. Athens was never this big. There's too many buildings, even some skyscrapers. Where the heck have I ended up?
And then...
Then I spotted a sign and almost ran off the road in shock.
See that Cary is now driving past a sign that reads, "Welcome to Central City." Cary thinks,
oh no, this can't be. No way.
Yes, wait, Ed, we arrive at the top of page 4. His narration continues.
The incredible, the impossible was staring me in the face. For, as you Flash readers well know, Central City is the fictional town where the fastest man alive lives.
Cary's inside the car still, in this first panel of page 4, looking around, taking it all in as he thinks to himself,
how often I've seen that same skyline drawn by Infantino and Novik. But how can I be seeing something real when Central City exists only in a comic book?
Narration continues for the next panel.
Hardly the type who could resist a tantalizing mystery, I drove into Central City and parked my car.
Yep, Cary's parked his car. He's got out. He's standing beside it, looking around. We can see a shop behind, obviously a shoe store. Dark-haired young lady looking in the window. Some other vehicles parked around. Cary looks around and thinks,
everything here looks normal enough. Nothing I wouldn't expect to see in any other Midwestern town. But I relaxed too soon, for right on cue, just when you'd expect something unexpected to happen in a Flash story...
Yes, we can see there's a bank nearby, and a figure in familiar black and orange striped trousers and a blue and orange striped shirt and black and yellow striped sleeves and a cape wearing a black mask and little blue booties has vaulted through the window of the bank and running away with a bag full of cash in midair. Someone from the bank is yelling after him, "Stop him, someone! The trickster just robbed the bank!" Cary's head whirls around. He takes this in and thinks,
holy cow! One of the Rogues Gallery villains in the flesh! I had written yarns about all of Flash's costumed foes, so I knew only too well about the trickster's remarkable jet shoes.
It's a great shot of Cary watching the trickster doing his skywalking, as Cary thinks,
that running of air stunt of his has to be seen to be believed, and now I really believe.
His narration caption to round out page 4 reads,
but before I could catch my breath, a crimson blur flashed upon the scene.
Yes, a crimson and yellow blur has come speeding in, turning round and round on the pavement underneath the trickster, as Cary thinks,
wow, somehow I should have expected this. When the trickster shows up, can he be far behind?
A small caption tells you we're continuing the third page following, past an advertisement for some fishing gear and a DC subscription advert, which is some nice emphasis on Plop and Superman family. I got issue 11 of Plop when I was in Mega City Comics in Camden last week. Listeners, if you're interested, we arrive at the top of page 5. Cary's narration continues.
I can hardly find the words to tell you, reader, what it was like to see the fastest man alive in glorious living Technicolor.
Yes, Cary looks wide-eyed and crazy, quite frankly, here as he's taking it all in. Almost a very, very good drawing, very photorealistic, actually. Cary is thinking.
Of the various ways I've described Flash's super speed in my scripts, none can compare to the dazzling sight it really is.
Narration for the next panel.
Strangely, the Scarlet Speedster was using the very tactic I would have written for him in such a situation, whipping up an instant whirlwind under his fleeting foe.
Yeah, it's a great panel. We're kind of up in the air with the trickster, as we can see Barry, the Flash, down on the ground, turtling round and round and round, creating this, well, very helpfully, the trickster thinks.
Air suction starting to tuck me down.
Great panel as we see, yeah, as I say, the trickster being sucked into this vortex. Cary's narration.
Of course, I didn't know what the trickster was actually thinking, but it must have been something like this.
Yep, and it's a great another great panel as the trickster gets drawn down into the vortex. He thinks.
Ever since I broke jail, I've been hoping Flash and I would tangle, so I could hit him with my tricky new gimmick.
It looks to my eyes as if the trickster's produced a glowing yo-yo. Well, goodness me, we'll see what happens next. Cary narrates.
When the rogue deftly dangled a glowing spool-like toy in the centre of the speeding Flash circle, I knew my hero was in for trouble.
Yes, the trickster's yo-yo seems to be creating a little rainbow spectrum of light above the Flash. Cary notices this is going on and he thinks,
A yo-yo, shooting out multicoloured beams. Beams that were to have a startling, stunning effect on the super speedster.
yes, this is a great, I want to put this entire page on the socials, it's gorgeous. We can see the yo-yo in the sort of foreground of the panel and the various orange, blue, green and purple beams radiating out from it. The Flash, still circling rapidly to create the vortex, looks at the yo-yo and says, "What's happening to me?" Cary's narration for the first panel on page 6.
A heartbeat later, the trickster's shoes touched down, but to my wide-eyed astonishment...
Yeah, we see the trickster alighting on the pavement, still waving the yo-yo, as Cary thinks.
Huh? Where's Flash?
And he narrates the next caption.
He was out of sight, moving too fast for me to see and clear out of the picture, because I felt a momentary wind zip past me.
Yeah, we see Cary sort of leaning against the wall of the building he's standing next to, and the Flash zooms past along the pavement and out of sight. Cary is thinking.
This isn't the Flash I know. My hero would never turn his back on a crook and flee.
Cary gets another nice photorealistic close-up in the next panel as he's thinking.
Come to think of it, I never thought I'd see the Flash, period. I still haven't figured out an explanation for all this madness. I feel like I'm walking through the pages of a comic book. I bet even my Flash editor would reject a far-fetched plot like this.
Cary's hair looks astonishing from the back in the next panel. I hate being bald. His narration continues.
Plot! I had thought the magic word. As I watched Trickster arrogantly jet off with his loot, something struck me.
Yep, it's a great shot of Cary looking up at the trickster running all through the sky as Cary thinks.
Wait! Just before that weird fog came up, I was mentally plotting my next Flash story, and the villain was the Trickster. The skeptic in me says coincidence, but the writer in me says it's something different. It reminds me of a fantastic story my editor once printed about the time Flash actually visited him in his editorial office.
Yes, and a little asterisk takes us to another regular, normal, non-narrated caption that reads,
Flash, Fact or Fiction, in the May 1968 issue of The Flash.
Yes, now that's a story that we did, issue 179 of The Flash. We did that in our 83rd episode. I checked way back in December 2021.
Crikey.
And if you'd asked me, I would have said, oh yeah, we did that about 6 months ago. No, we did it a long time ago. So yes, listeners, if you haven't listened to that one already, once you finish this episode, make sure you go back and listen to episode 83. We'll probably post a link to it on the socials at some point this week. Cary returns to his car on the final panel of page 6, thinking.
Julie's explanation was that there's another plane of existence. A parallel Earth, he called it, where most everything that happens in our comic books actually happens. It's a world where Flash and Central City really exist.
He drives off. In the first panel of page 7, we see him behind the wheel as he continues to think.
It could be that I'm living in that world right now. Suppose my imagination was especially vivid when I plotted my Trickster story behind the wheel, and my mental concentration opened up a rift between the two Earths.
In panel 2 of page 7, he's arrived at a house. Got out the car, walking up the path, we can see a mailbox that reads, The Allens. Now we know where Cary's going at this point, don't we? He's marching towards the front door. Cary's thinking.
The rift would explain the sudden fog when I was approaching Athens. Central City in Flash's world must stand in the same site that Athens occupies in my world.
And as Cary presses the doorbell that's labelled Barry Allen in panel 3, he thinks.
Setting Trickster loose was the start of a story idea in my mind, which turned into a real happening here in Flash's realm. If my theory's correct, I'm to blame for what's happening here.
And the next panel is, again, narrated by Cary.
Let me tell you, reader, what I had in mind took a lot of nerve, but I felt obligated to try and help Flash.
Iris Allen has answered the door to Cary. We recognise Iris. It's good to see her. She's not been in an episode for a very long time. Cary says,
Hello, Mrs. Allen. How are your parents enjoying life in the far future, in the year 2974?
Iris is stunned. Who are you? And how do you know about Mom and Dad?
Flabbergasted. Iris invited me in, more out of shock than hospitality, I guess. And that's when I saw...
Yep, a familiar blonde figure has arrived, and Cary identifies him as...
Barry Allen! I apologise for startling your wife, but I had to get in to see you as fast as possible.
He knows about my parents, Barry. All about them. And me. And of course, we're led to some more narration from Cary.
Of course I knew. I knew Iris Allen was, would be, born 1,000 years in the future, and that her parents sent her back in our time era as a baby, because there's a Flash story that explained it all.
And very helpfully, we're given another caption that reads...
The Flash's wife is a two-timer in issue 203 of The Flash.
Yes, and that's a reference to a story which we did in our 129th episode back in November 2022, so we might post a link to that one as well. Goodness me, it's a good thing we covered those stories in the past, isn't it, Peter?
Yes, it's almost like it was planned.
Yes, it's almost like we looked ahead and thought, right, anyway. So, there's a great shot here of Cary at his typewriter. We cut back to the present as Cary is saying to Barry,
Please, there's no time to waste. Don't ask questions, just listen. It's all my fault the Trickster is on a crime wave again, but I can help you capture him.
But why tell me? I just work in the police lab, says Barry. And if you arrive at top of page 8, Cary narrates.
I should have expected that. Barry was playing dumb, protecting his secret identity.
And then Cary thinks.
There's no time for games. Have to get drastic.
And then he says,
Barry Allen, you're the Flash and I can prove it.
And there's a touch of Chekhov's ring in this panel. As we can see Barry's left hand in the foreground. Cary lunges forward in panel 2. His narration reads,
I caught him off guard and lunged forward to press the secret spring in his costume ring. Instantly, the compressed Flash costume expanded on contact with the air.
Hey, what are you doing? Exclaims Barry. And Iris says, Good heavens, he knows everything. And, indeed, Barry's uniform is expanding to full size. Cary's narration for panel 3.
Since his secret was out, Barry switched garb at super speed. But he was mad. Sizzling mad.
Yes, panel 3 with Iris looking aghast in the doorway. The Flash speeds off, bearing Cary in front of him, with the Flash saying, Let's go, fella. You're coming along with me on a trickster hunt.
Wow!
Cary narrates the next panel.
Even though I didn't dare tell Flash how I knew, he sensed I was telling the truth.
Standing now in a nice little rocky outcrop that overlooks Central City, the Flash is saying, Okay, Cary, I'll take a chance. You say the trickster is hiding out at the abandoned State Fair Pavilion, so I'll check it out.
You see, reader, just before the fog lift interrupting my story plotting, I had mentally chosen the pavilion as the trickster's hideout.
Yes, we see the Flash once again bearing Cary in front of him, as Cary's narration continues.
So I knew it was where he had to be holed up. The trouble was, that's as far as my plot went. I had no idea what was going to happen next.
Final panel then of page 8. Cary's narration caption sets the scene.
When we reached the deserted pavilion...
Yep, the Flash has dropped Cary on his feet and started accelerating forward, vibrating through the wall of the pavilion, saying, You stay here, while I vibrate inside and out-trick a trickster. We arrive then at the top of page 9.
Reader, if you thought Flash's first run-in with Trickster was a disaster, you ain't seen nothing yet.
A great shot of the Trickster here, counting his loot. There's a bit of Chekhov's yo-yo going on, as his yo-yo is conspicuously dangling from his belt. And in fact, the Trickster notices that something's happening to his yo-yo, as he thinks.
Oh, my yo-yo is spinning wildly. That can mean only one thing. Someone filling the air with super speed vibrations, and here he comes now, right through the wall.
That last part out loud is the Flash in a shockingly rendered panel, if you ask me. This is some of the worst art I've ever seen on this page. The Flash vibrates through the wall into the pavilion. Cary's narration.
The wily fox. That yo-yo of his was geared to be activated by Flash's speed. Ensuring the Trickster would never be caught off guard.
In the next panel, the Flash is, he's putting his hand to his head. He looks a little bit lost. He says out loud, What am I doing inside this empty pavilion? Why did I vibrate through the wall in such a hurry? Standing behind him, the Trickster is twirling his yo-yo around. And he says,
Because you're the fastest fool alive, Flash. A fool and a sucker for my trickery. Thanks to the spell of my yo-yo, you can't hear or see me. And the same goes for my loot.
Yes, it continues to spin the yo-yo in front of the Flash, standing looking thoughtful. We see the money piled on the table. Close up of the Flash with the yo-yo spinning in front of him in the next panel as the Trickster continues.
As far as you're concerned, Flash in the Pan, I was never here. Now go back to where you came from.
And outside, Cary has found a window or something because he can see what's happening, and he's thinking,
What a diabolic gimmick! None of the weapons I ever dreamed up for the trickster can match this new one. It's his niftiest trick yet, and his deadliest.
Cary's narration continues in the first panel of page 10.
Compelled to leave as trickster commanded, Flash super sped away, so dazed he didn't even glance my way.
Yep, we see Flash once again vibrating back through the wall of the pavilion and running off. Cary watches him go, thinking,
This story is getting out of control. Flash would never fall for the same trick more than twice, and I'm not about to let a perfect record be zilched.
He narrates the next caption.
Thinking furiously, I came up with a plan of action. It meant hitching a ride into town and sneaking back to the pavilion late at night with my secret weapon.
Yes, some time has obviously passed. Deeper shadows indicate that we are in the evening, at night. Cary's creeping back up to the pavilion. He has something in his hand, but we can't really see what it is. There are some visible snoring sound effects coming out of the open window of the pavilion. Cary is thinking,
I'm in luck. Those snoring noises tell me the trickster is sound asleep. After I finish here, I've got to plot some strategy with Barry and Iris.
He narrates the next caption.
What was I up to, you wonder? And why did I spend the rest of the night sitting in front of the Central City's Federal Bank?
Yeah, we see Cary sat on the pavement. He has his hands up to his temples. Looks like he's concentrating. And for the next couple of panels, he thinks,
I've written the trickster character enough to second guess him. I know he's planning to pull a job today, and if I have anything to say about it, he'll hit this bank. After all, since I plotted Trickster's comeback, maybe I can plot his last job too. Concentrate, Cary.
Some time passes. Cary narrates the next caption.
Finally, just at the break of dawn.
Yes, very well coloured panel, this one. We can see the yellow and pink morning sun. We can see Cary in the foreground making a call on a telephone box as the trickster floats in the sky in the background towards a large building which we can see has the word bank written on it. Yes, it's the same one that he's been sitting outside of. And Cary is saying, down the phone,
Hello, Iris. This is Cary. Tell Barry my plan worked. Trickster is about to strike the Federal Bank. And even before I could hang up the phone...
Yep, we see him still in the phone booth, and the Flash runs past. Cary is thinking,
Whew, and I thought I knew the meaning of the word fast.
We arrive then at the top of page 11, and Cary narrates.
Trickster saw the Scarlet Speedster on the way, and by the smirk on his face, he wasn't the least bit worried.
The trickster has left the bank. Obviously, probably got some more cash. He's still twirling his yo-yo in his right index finger as the Flash runs towards him. Trickster says,
Well, well, if it isn't the Flash, I see you've come to amuse me while I rob this bank.
Cary narrates panel 2.
Once again, it looked like the yo-yo was doing its hypnotic dirty work.
Yes, the Flash speeds past the trickster. As the trickster still waggles his yo-yo, the trickster's saying,
Nothing worse than a stuck-up superhero. You're going to run past without even saying hello, old foe. Ha ha ha.
However,
Like Trickster expected, Flash didn't seem to see nor hear him. But what he didn't expect...
Flash has sped past the trickster and caught him in his wake. So the Flash is now running along, bearing the trickster behind him. In the next panel, we see that the Flash has continued to speed through Central City, probably to the other side of town. We can see that he's run past a big warehouse, and he's now running towards another building, which is labelled Car Wash. And the trickster yells,
Hey, this ain't fair. Flash wasn't even trying to capture me. Now what?
Yep, and as they run into the building, the car wash mechanism starts doing what it has to do, with the trickster being soaked as he yells,
Yipes! Running through a car wash. Flash has gone crazy.
Cary narrates the next caption, which reads,
Crazy like a fox. Flash sped through the car wash so fast he didn't even get wet. But Trickster wasn't that lucky.
Very funny panel. Trickster sat in the draining panel at the end of the car wash, covered in soapy bubbles, and he says,
I've been tricked. You did see me, didn't you?
Flash, looking down at Trickster, then says, Come to think of it, you do look familiar. Let's see when I get rid of those soap suds. And we arrive at the top of page 12 where Cary narrates,
Poor Trickster. How could he have known I took his hypnotic yo-yo last night as he slept and left him with an ordinary yo-yo I'd bought in Central City?
What are the chances? Yes, the Flash picks the Trickster up, starts shaking him around, vibrating him so that all the soap and bubbles goes flying off, and the Flash says, Well, well, if it isn't James Jesse, alias the Trickster, the crook who's got a standing reservation at the state pen. Flash, slowing down the shaking now. Maybe he's dried the Trickster off. That might be nice of him. The Trickster, just all he can give us is a slow dissolve. Cary's narration.
After the rogue villain was taken into custody...
Yep, Flash is standing talking to Cary, and he's saying, I owe you more than a thank you, Cary. On his way to jail, Trickster boasted his next diabolic trick would have been the death of me.
Forget it, Flash. Helping superheroes in a jam is my specialty.
Cary's narration for the next panel.
As I pointed my car out of Central City, I could imagine Flash's puzzlement when he saw...
Yep, it's almost Barry's point of view looking over his shoulder. Cary's car, driving off, and a massive, dirty great cloud has arrived, and Flash is thinking, where'd that sudden fog come from? Either it's playing tricks on my eyes, or Cary's car is starting to fade away.
And it did just that, only to rematerialise in more familiar territory.
Yes, we see Cary's car emerging from the foggy cloud, a sign reading, Welcome to Athens, Ohio, and as he drives along, Cary is thinking,
As I hoped. The unique plotting power I possessed in Flash's realm enabled me to recreate the fog lift for a return trip to my own world.
And in the next panel, it's a nice shot of a happy, smiley Cary driving along as he's saying,
And that's my latest Flash story, readers, told to you exactly as it happened. And if editor Julie doesn't believe this when he reads it, I've got Trickster's hypnotic yo-yo to convince him.
Yes, and we see the yo-yo hanging, dangling, waving from the rear view mirror. And as Cary drives off, we see another sign that reads New York 60 miles as Cary says,
The class reunion was a gas, but it couldn't match the excitement of the day I saved the life of the Flash.
And a little bit of writing on the road tells us we have reached
The end.
Interesting.
I love this
Interesting
story.
things of note. Yes, I thought you might. Because you're a big fan of Cary Bates, aren't you?
I
You've
am.
said this many times in the past, and you love Irv Novick.
Yes, and this is one of the reasons why I love Cary Bates, because he does mad bonker stuff like this. Yeah, I think I was enjoying the Flash stories as I was buying them as back issues, but when I read this one, it completely blew me away,
Right.
and it just confirmed my belief that Cary Bates is the best writer of the Flash ever. There we are. The Barry Allen Flash, obviously. So, yeah, it's incredible. Incidentally, there is no mention of the term Earth Prime in this story.
That's an excellent point.
So he must be going back to Earth Zero, because that's what's been established as the Earth that we all live on, according to the latest pages of Adventure Comics.
That's very true. No, that's true. No, it's an interesting one. I mean, it's a fan getting the chance to kind of flex his muscles a little bit.
Yeah.
A clear sequel to Flash Facts of Fiction from issue 179.
Yes.
That's interesting on its own, just the fact that such a thing's been done, because continuity of this sort is still quite rare at this point in DC Comics.
Yes.
But no, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I was mildly critical of some of the way that the Flash was rendered art-wise, but I think what Irv was doing, there's a slight, almost simple, unreal element to the way Barry and the Flash look, but Cary is drawn in a very photorealistic sort of style.
Yeah.
I think that was probably deliberate on Irv's part, just to kind of highlight the cross-dimensional unreality of it. Maybe the fact that Cary was narrating it, and to him it all maybe seemed a bit dreamlike and unreal. I mean, I'm amused at the super easy way that he got to Earth 1.
Again, another way that you can travel between parallel universes is just plotting. Concentration and plotting.
Concentration and plotting on your way to Ohio, it seems. Tin soldiers and Nixons come and we're finally on our own. So, yes.
If you want to know this, the location of Central City in America is basically where Athens, Ohio is here.
Yes.
So it's in Ohio.
So yeah, I expect Steve, Brandon and Shag all to team up and go on a road trip to there and pick up Chuck and Ranger Gordon on the way. Yeah, that's all. I mean, that's something that always fascinates me, is kind of, approximates and equivalents of things in Earth 1. But yeah, it felt super easy. I mean, I'd be sort of worried that Cary doesn't start doing this every time he's out driving and maybe thinks a little bit too hard.
Well, it might happen again. Something similar might happen in the future. You never know.
I can't remember, listeners. Interesting. One thing I did enjoy was the wild variety in voices used by the Trickster in that episode. But no, it's interesting that it's all basically from Cary's point of view.
Yes.
Like the Flash is a guest star in his own strip, which is quite funny. It's a wee bit too self-indulgent for me, I'm going to be honest.
Oh,
I can appreciate it, and it's good and all that. It's interesting, and it's building towards the proper establishment of Earth Prime. And one thing that we did, obviously, very early on in the podcast was we decided that where possible, we'd do Earth Prime stories where we found them, like be it Arnold Drake breaking the fourth wall in the final issue of the Doom Patrol, or that issue of Strange Adventures that we did very, very early on.
Yes.
Within the first, half a dozen episodes or so of starting. Gosh, so it's nice to have another one. It's such an interesting idea, the fact that we are on our own Earth and potentially could vibrate or find ourselves in Barry's Earth.
Yes.
And I'm glad that they haven't forgotten about it. I'm glad that Cary remembered it. And I almost wonder if it's ever going to be used as some kind of out of nowhere sort of ending to resolve. Could it be used at some point, maybe 40 or 50 issues in the future, to suddenly change and remove and rewrite a horrible, nasty thing that might happen in the Flash ongoing story? We'll have to wait and see.
Well, yes. Although you said this is kind of a sequel to Flash Factor Fiction, it's also kind of a thematic sequel to Flash of Two Worlds.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay. Because you got Cary basically being Barry in Flash of Two Worlds and travelling from one Earth to another, and he rocks up at the door of the Flash, and he basically hits.
Yep.
He basically hits him with knowledge that he has that totally stuns them.
You're right. Yeah, the parallels are obvious.
Because I've got the page from Flash 123 here,
Right.
and Barry turns up and says, "I share a secret known to only you and your girlfriend Joan Williams," and of course they're married now.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically Barry goes on to recount J Flash's origin, and Cary turns up and does exactly the same thing here, except his opening gambit is talking about Iris coming from the future.
Yes.
It's wonderful. Again,
Yes.
it's such lovely little touches like that. And of course, that's what you do. Weirdly, the mailbox has got the Allens on it, but the doorbell has got Barry Allen above it. Does Iris have her own doorbell? That's what I want to know.
Well, as far as you know, at this point, they were still sleeping in separate beds. Bless them. No, maybe they hadn't got around to just replacing it. Maybe maybe he was just a bit lazy after Iris had moved in, and that was his own place, or I don't know. But that's an interesting point. It's interesting we're getting another parallel Earth type story, because we used to get them, it feels a bit more often. I think the last one we probably got was the Freedom Fighters story. And I'm glad that this kind of happens in a sort of a more intimate way, just with one hero. And of course, if this was going to happen, it would have to be the Flash.
Of course, yes, without a doubt. So obviously at the end of Flash Factor Fiction, in Julie's office, there's a cosmic treadmill. So now we have Cary bringing back hypnotic yo-yo as well. So I'm just thinking about artifacts that are on Earth Prime.
Earth 1 artifacts on Earth Prime. That's a story just waiting to be told, isn't it?
It is indeed.
I wonder if Cary Bates will write it. I can't remember when the cosmic treadmill pops up again, actually.
I thought it was quite funny, Cary going off to buy a yo-yo, because it's one of these things that I always talk about. Is like, is the currency exactly the same looking on each Earth? That means that there's Earth Prime dollars floating around on Earth 1.
Yeah.
It's just that sort of weird stuff.
I know what you mean. It's
really
the sort of thing, it's like that episode of the G.I. Joe cartoon when Worlds Without End, it's called the Parallel Earth one, where they buy all the motorbikes, and the old man that they've bought from doesn't realise till they've gone that they've paid with US dollars.
Ah, okay.
And, these are American dollars, they're no use. And you always think about it in Doctor Who, when, the time travel, I can only think of Remembrance being the one, Remembrance of the Daleks, the one story where Sylvester makes a point of giving Ace money that's appropriate for the time.
Yeah.
You do sort of think about that sort of stuff. And it's an interesting thing that we didn't think of when we did that Superman story last week, when Willie talked about how the price of a bus ride had gone up from a nickel to 35 cents. Did he try and pay with a 5 cents coin from his Earth?
He would have done.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Are we digging too deep, listeners, when we think about these sort of things? I don't know. I often think, when I idly speculate to myself, if I was to somehow travel back in time and go and see my folks before, when they were a bit younger and I was a bit younger, it's a good thing I've got that jar up there that's got all the old size 5 pences and shillings in it, and one old large 50 pence, because then I could take those with me, and I'd at least have a few coins that I'd be able to spend in, like, I don't know, 1977 or something. Yeah, that's an interesting thing that no one ever really thinks about. You're very right. But obviously that was something that Martin Pascoe thought about when he wrote the G.I. Joe story. So
Pesky Pascoe. Yep. Fantastic.
Maybe Martin had similar thoughts after reading the stories we've just done.
Yes. I did really enjoy Irv Novic's art in this, and I did especially like the cityscape that we get of Central City, because again, it's like a big city and then suddenly it stops. There's no suburbs. It literally stops and there's forests around it. Yeah,
very Carmine, like Opal City was sort of highlighted as being in Starman in the 90s. Yeah, no, it's great, because you're reminded of all those Carmine issues where, in fact, just like the Flash one we did a couple of weeks ago, actually, in Flash 227, where he's suddenly outside the city and running through the wooded areas, And
Cary's comments as it's just like Infantino and Novik drew it.
Yes.
Obviously not a Ross Andrew fan. Or indeed Gil Kane, who did a couple of issues.
That's a point. That's fair. Yes, that's interesting. I mean, let's be honest. If I'm going to pick it, I'd pick Carmine as well if I had to pick a favourite Flash artist.
There we are.
Cary and I have that much in common. Shall we have a look at the contemporary correspondence?
Let's jump ahead.
Yes, jumping ahead to issue 231 in this case, listeners. And the first letter reads, Dear Editor, Cary Bates is a genius. Not just your average run-of-the-mill DC genius, but a full-fledged, out-and-out genius. I can't remember the last time a comic book took me out of the safe realm of proven fact and made me wonder. I mean, Cary's excellent tale actually had me believing him from the moment I picked it up. The day I saved the life of the Flash, and Flash 228 has to be one of the finest Scarlet Speedster tales ever written. No, the finest. That's going a bit far. And I don't use superlative statements unless I really mean them. What more can I say? That Mr. Bates is one of the finest writers I've ever come across? That the Flash might just replace Green Arrow as my favourite superhero? That, along with the Highway Patrolman's son, I too would love Cary's John Hancock to treasure above all others. After that long-winded dissertation, all I can say is thanks. Thanks for a classic, a collector's edition. Thanks for a much-needed escape from terrifying reality into the world of Cary Bates' brilliant imagination. That heartfelt missive is from Pat Christensen, Waukegan, Illinois. Steve, get over there and take a photograph of the sign. The editorial response is...
Unparalleled enthusiasm is the only way we can describe reader response to the day I saved the life of the Flash. So we've decided to shut our editorial mouth and let you readers do all the talking. Actually, Pat brings up an interesting point we didn't talk about, and that's Cary getting pulled over by the policeman.
Yes.
And him recognise it. What are the odds? What are the odds he would recognise the name?
What does that say about Cary's ego, that he thinks of himself so highly that a policeman would know him? That's interesting. Are you Peter Watson that wrote the Langmore Hame? My son was forced to buy a copy by a man with a big nose. Anyway.
And the second letter says, Dear Editor, how does one describe total escape? How does one tell you guys that your creative genius is at an all-time high? How do I put into words my reaction to Flash 228? A 3-letter to WOW might be the answer, but it definitely strikes out in any attempt to award accolades unto the day I saved the life of the Flash. Let's stop fooling around and begin to say something, right? Well, I can't, because how does one... Oh no, I'm doing it again. If the stories continue at this high caliber, I may never be able to write another letter. And that's from Joe Peluso, Brooklyn, New York.
Next letter reads, Dear Editor, a reader wrote some time back and said the reason for the Flash's success was the absurd situations done with a straight face. Issue 228 would prove this point. From the terror-stricken Flash on the cover being held in control by his writer, clever, to the subtle and not so subtle puns, this was truly a fun, absurd, put on but done with a Cary Bates sincerity which marks all his good efforts. And that's from Kurt Fowler, Jacksonville, Florida. Next letter.
Dear Editor, the day I saved the life of the Flash was weak in plot, action and even characterisation of Flash and Iris.
Wow.
It didn't even offer a plausible explanation for the trickster's jailbreak, nor any attempt at how his hypnotic yo-yo worked. So why did I love it? Because it gave us a real insight into the mind and personality of Cary Bates.
Did Cary Bates pick all these letters?
We see that he is so wrapped up in his Flash plotting that he not only saves the Scarlet Speedster's life, but also recreates one of the most famous scenes in the Flash's career. Cary's confrontation with Iris and Barry parallels the meeting of our Flash with Jay Garrick, the original Flash, and his wife in Flash of Two Worlds. I hadn't read this ahead, folks.
I don't believe you.
Okay.
No, I do believe you. Of course I do.
I suspect it was more than coincidence that our venerable author placed himself in such a comparable position. And that's from Fred Schneider, New York, New York.
Yes, we've heard from Fred before, and I think we've also heard from the next chap. Dear Editor, all right, Cary, who are you trying to kid? You get transported to Central City, meet the Flash, and all you bring back is a measly yo-yo? Why don't you admit somebody conned you into buying a $10 yo-yo instead of dreaming up a wild story about going to Earth 1 and taking it from the trickster? That's from Robert Sherrill, Titusville, FLA.
There we are. I think Cary should pay Robert a visit and hypnotise him into believing him with his yo-yo. The final letter says, Dear Editor, in the printing below the first page of Flash 228, it says no actual persons should be inferred. Well, you and Mr. Bates are mentioned. Are you fictional? How do you explain it? And that's from James Aquino from Chicago, Illinois.
Editorial response, of course they're fictional. Who'd ever believe that people like editor Julie Schwartz and author Cary Bates are real? In fact, I don't exist either. This page is being written by a typewriter named Bob Rozakis.
There we are.
And that rounds out issue 230. Listeners, for my birthday last year, Peter bought me a huge ton of Superboys, including the first appearance of Monel, but he also gave me issue 14 of Rotor Blitz.
Rotor Blitz.
Rotor Blitz, the German reprint series of The Flash, which reprints the story we have just covered. So be sure to check out the socials this week, because I'll be posting the cover of this and a few selected pages from the story translated into the German. Wouldn't that be fun?
Das ist gut, ja.
So Peter, where would people have to go to check our socials?
Well, you can write to us at the earth2podcast@gmail.com. On Facebook and Instagram, we're at the Earth2 Podcast, and on Twitter, we're at podcast_Earth2. And you can also leave us a voicemail. If you go to speakpipe.com/the Earth2 Podcast, you can tell us, with your voice, what you thought of this story.
Yes, please do. We'd love to hear what you thought. How do you think it compares to issue 179, or how does it even compare to the Iris being from the future story? We've just done a couple of Flash stories. Obviously, he will be back again, because obviously we're doing issue 229, because it features Jay Garrick. Get some notice to get hold of that copy of that if you don't have it already. and there'll be a few more Flash issues not too long after that. What we're doing next week, well, you just have to come back and find out, won't they, Peter?
Indeed, on that bombshell. I've been Peter.
And I've been David. Take care. We'll see you soon on
The Earth,
The Earth
2
2
podcast.
Transmatter Cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
How does he know all our innermost secrets? And as Barry's getting transformed into the Flash, he's saying, is that me?
Everyone apart from Cary and the Trickster.
12 times Peter's told me that.
But it definitely strikes out in any attempt to award accolades unto the day I saved the life of the Flash. Let's keep fooling around and begin.
Let's stop.
Let's-
There we go. That's a bit of a 180, isn't it? Right.